Guys, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If you didn't draw a hunt this year, don't worry. There are still ways to get a tag and get out in the field. Not only are there leftover and OTC opportunities, but if you join GoHunt.com Insider with promo code JScott by August 31st, 2021, you're also going to be entered to win $1,500 worth of KUIU gear. You also are going to get 10 entries into Go Hunt's big Summer of Elk giveaway, where you could win a 2022 New Mexico elk hunt and $15,000 in hunting gear. Go Hunt Insider is the one platform for finding great hunts, researching new units, e-scouting, and planning your hunt. Now, an added incredible value at no extra cost are desktop maps and maps available on iPhone and Android. Again, this is no extra cost. It's part of being an Insider member. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Sign up at gohunt.com/JScott and get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card just by using the JScott promo code. And also, don't forget, you're going to be entered into a drawing to win $1,500 worth of KUIU gear. I also want to thank the gear shop at gohunt.com and Cody Nelson, my friend of 20 plus years, the glassing guru. Don't forget, if you order on gohunt.com or you call or text Cody at 602-399-3699, you're going to get a 10% discount by using the JScott promo code. You can also call the shop directly at 702-847-8747 or email at optics@gohunt.com. I want to thank Go Hunt for their sponsorship of this podcast. I also want to thank KUIU Ultralight Hunting for sponsoring this podcast. That is the gear that I wear on all of my hunts. You can go to kuiu.com to order directly off the website. They're a direct-to-consumer company. They make the best hunting gear on the market today. Also, phonescope.com. Use the JScott21 promo code. You're going to get a 10% off on all orders at phonescope.com. Guys, thanks for listening, and let's get right to this episode.
No, like I said, me being an idiot, I forgot my notebook, and then I was like, oh yeah, because there's a whole bunch of questions that came in. Yeah, well, they're sitting on my stinking phone in my Instagram account, so how the heck am I going to sit here and do a live and then try to go back over to my messages? So literally, I'm sitting here I was like, oh crap, Scrabble notes, and then all of a sudden I look up, it's 5 after, I'm like, gee, okay, forget it, that's enough.
I've been sitting here doing a solo comedy tour here for 5 minutes.
How's that going for you?
Oh, not too great, actually. But to answer a question, Zach wanted to know how big the Ot6 ranch is. It's 50,000 acres deeded. Here's a question. If southern Colorado stays pretty green, what elevations that you'll think the elk will push to in early season, super high or 10-ish? Chris, we might as well start right with this question from Leo Jones. If it stays green, it's raining right now outside, and you're, I should say, you are in Colorado yourself doing some Roe ecological resources work, I believe, and you can fill us in on that. But what do you think if it stays green like it is? Where are the elk going to be? What elevation?
I think they're going to. I'm not even going to be concerned about. Well. Okay, so there's a lot of different habitats in Colorado, like you know, and so there's some areas that have high alpine stuff, and then there's some areas that literally the highest part of the mountain is 9,000 feet. I think in those areas where elk have access to alpine, I think you will see some of those animals going there and staying there simply because it's cooler. They're laying on fat, they're getting their winter coat starting to come in, so I think they're going to, a lot of times they're going to try to stay with that cooler temperatures, but also bugs. You can get up there and get away from the insects, and if there's ample food and water up there, they'll stay. But quite honestly, I think the biggest factor to where the elk are going to go is, at this point, with all the water that most areas are seeing, from the bottom of the mountain to the top, they've got food and water everywhere. So they're going to go where they have the best sanctuary, best safety. So just because you're seeing elk in high country basins right now, if you've got 20 mule deer hunters that pile into that thing, well, are the elk going to stay right there? No, they're not. They could go up and over the ridge because there's plenty of food and water up high, or they could just tip right down the mountain and drop down. So, this, and if you don't mind, I had a question come in. With Sterling Debner in a similar question, he was with this Colorado moisture. Is it going to affect the rut? Number one, or how will it affect the rut? And he was asking about, okay, so what about wallows? Do you even hunt wallows? And I see your face and I see you shaking your head. You know as darn well as I do. Okay, if we're just talking about wallows, the hotter, the drier it is, those wallows become just magnets because it's the only place they're getting water and they can cool off and get away from bugs. But when you literally have rainstorm after rainstorm every afternoon and it's cold and wet and there's water everywhere, man, they don't have to hit a particular wallow in it, day in and day out. They'll still probably use them a little bit just to get themselves stinky, but that's really about it. Unless you've got those, Jay, on yours, you've got both stock tanks and then you've got the stock pond type of deal. And I've always advocated, and people in Arizona know this all the time as well. If an elk has a chance to wallow around in a dirt tank in a big pond, they will do. Yeah, that's what they want. It's not because of just, there's water there. And it's not just because, there's mud there and I can get wallowed up. They can actually find water and they can find mud other places. But when we're talking about, there you go, bingo, you nailed it. So when we're talking about the rut, we're talking about bulls with cows, it becomes a social place. And so that is kind of what if you find a wallow that's tucked right smack dab, like way back up into a bedding area, okay, that'd be a great midday set if the wind is going to allow it. But if you felt that you just wanted to try to hunt water, maybe you're not a good caller, maybe you don't have as much mobility, quite honestly, at this point, maybe the little tiny wallows aren't where you go. Maybe you look for those larger, whether it's a beaver pond, whether it's just a big wet area or whatever, where the elk can have a social interaction. And as far as the rut goes, Jay, on the website, the elk module on the website, I've got an 8-part series on just what affects the elk rut. And the relevant part of this one, when we're talking about moisture and food availability, the only thing that's going to do is allow those cows to cycle in on their normal time frame. So if they normally on average cycle in, say, September 19th, having high body fat right now is going to allow them to cycle normally. But all the other things I talk about, whether she has a calf at her side, whether she's bonded with cows, whether she's in the presence of a mature bull, if that mature bull has been there for an extended period of time, all those other factors can affect when that cow is going to cycle. But when we're talking about moisture this year, it's just going to allow them to cycle on their normal routine.
Chris, a question, kind of parlaying this into some other questions we have and going back to something that we talked about. You used to talk about hunting your high country camp in Colorado, OTC, and you always talk about there's a time that you really like to hunt, which was the latter part of August. Now with the season starting, I believe, September 2nd, you don't necessarily get that time frame. My question would be, and it kind of goes back to this other guy's question, is what specifically in the high country made them come from above timberline and get out of timberline? I always say, like, it's the first frost, something about it, they just move out of there. But what, in your mind, when you could hunt in August, you had about a 5 to 7 day window when you had all your elk up high, yep. And then the bulls, they left. Talk about that.
I think it's multifaceted. I think it depends on exactly what basin we're talking about. But, you hear somebody, people talk, and I've talked about it for years, about that pre-rut move. So in the summer, you're going to have those elk on the high country. And again, folks that are listening to this that don't hunt in alpine areas, there's going to be similarities to the behavior, but it may be less dictated by elevation. Okay, so it's going to be habitat. So, down in southern Colorado, in some places, well, heck, Jay, even on the Ot6 ranch in places, do they have access to above timberline stuff? Yes. But do they have a lot of low-lying stuff as well? Yes. they move across your landscape and they will separate. So the bulls are summering in one area, the cows and calves are going to be in another area. As that summer progresses and the bulls go hard horned, they're going to, let's just talk about the high country. They're going to be in the high country. They're going to be separated a little bit. So the cows and calves are going to be in one area. The bulls are going to be somewhere nearby, off adjacent basins or something, whatever. As they go hard horn and the bulls start to make their way to those cow calf groups, there's going to be a lot of interspecific competition. They're going to try to be getting their pecking order figured out. They're going to be going over there. They're going to be displaying. They're going to be walking in and around the cow calf groups. They're going to be displaying for those females. They're going to be letting them know, their body size matters, and their confirmation and their confidence and their entire persona matters on cows choosing those bulls. And so they get into that high country and they start to mingle with those cows. However, cows will start to bust themselves out into little groups as well. And so you start to see where those bulls, there's a little bit of competition. They're vying for cows. Those cows want to start to split up. And quite honestly, sometimes they've just learned that as soon as August comes, so do the people. So therefore, I need to move down into the timber where it's safe. Other times, they learn there's a bunch of cows here. I have my group of cows. The longer I stay out exposed, the more likelihood another bull is going to come in and try to challenge me and try to push me out and take my. I'm just going to take my cows and we're going to go down into the timber where I can disappear with my ladies. Now, and I said that specifically because there's a lot of people that's what they believe. The bull comes in, the bull takes the cows, the bull pushes them down the mountain to protect them. Yes, Jay. I love your face. You're like me. There was a meme the other day that says, I don't need a mood ring because I have a face. So, yeah, no. The cows are the ones that choose the bull. And think about your daily lives. If you're married, who's running the daily activity schedule for your family? It ain't you. Let's just put it that way. You have an input. You can suggest, and if your suggestion's good, she'll follow. But if it's not, she just overrides you, and you're like, well, that was nice, honey, but we're going to do this. Okay. Same thing with elk. The cows choose the bull that they want to bond with. The cows are the ones oftentimes that are going to be like, from a safety standpoint, cows don't like to be harassed. And so if they have a very large, mature bull that absolutely can defend that group and keep all the riffraff away, okay, well then fine. Maybe we defer to him because he can keep us safe. But in many of these over-the-counter areas, we don't have that age class. We have a 2.5-year-old or 3.5-year-old bull that might be with those cows. He does not. Not only does he not have the ability to, quote-unquote, adequately defend, really. Most of the time, he's acting like a stupid teenager, and he's pushing the cows around constantly anyway. So the cows will take them out of those vulnerable situations and tuck themselves down into some of these gnarly little pockets simply because the cows don't want to deal with the crap. They've already had to settle for a younger age class bull that they probably don't care for anyway, but that's the best that they've got around them. So fine. Come on. We're going down here. We're going to go back down the mountain. We're going to find a little place to tuck ourselves into, stay away from all the conflict, stay away from all the riffraff until I get bred. I don't care about anybody else. I want to get bred. And then once I get bred, you guys can do what you want. So there was a couple different reasons in my high country camp. I think it was they learned behavior from previous people pressure. But more importantly, every year I watched it happen. They were up in that Alpine Basin, and those years where the season started August 25th, you'd have multiple bulls, multiple cow-calf groups, and you could get in there, and the bulls weren't paired up. I mean, you could actually do something. But as soon as it was like August 27th to 29th, they're making the move, and by September 1st, you'd be hard pressed to find an elk in that basin.
A specific question: did you notice on dry years when it was dry and the vegetation above timberline was not as good compared to when it's wet and vegetation above timberline is very good? Did you see a correlation of maybe they stayed later, maybe they left earlier? Can you talk a little bit about, like on this year, in most of Colorado is very wet. In Montana, it's very dry. Can you talk about a correlation of wet and dry, and did they stay later or did they leave earlier?
Okay, so I did a video. It's on the elk module, and I talk about basically looking at a mountain like a sponge. If you took a big giant triangular sponge, if you're constantly sprinkling water onto the top of the sponge, that sponge is going to get saturated from the tippy top all the way down to the bottom. But if you just turn off that faucet, what's going to happen with that water? It's slowly going to just settle, and it's going to fall down that, off the peak. And so that peak of the sponge is going to start to dry out, especially with the wind blowing on it and everything else. It's going to dry out before the bottom does. And you can see that a lot of times in dry years with the alpine, where you look up there and all of a sudden, like, man, it's the end of August, but I'm seeing yellows and golds and oranges. And it's like,
burns out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the forage quality starts to drastically decrease. Well, if they have the option of choosing better forage in some other place, a lot of times they will. And so oftentimes I've seen they actually will come down out of that high country into some of those lower areas that have better moisture and better feed quality. Now, with that being said, if they get bumped and disturbed excessively down lower, it's not uncommon for them to say, screw it. For safety standpoint, I'm going back up to where I have a little bit, I've got more options for safety, and I'll just deal with a little bit lesser quality food. But yeah, no, if it's a dry year, I will always hunt where the water is and where the better forage is, and then I will branch out from there and try to find them. I'm going to go to where I think they should be, and then I will branch out to see if I can track them down.
Got a question here. What should an eastern hunter do if their area was burnt? Move, or will elk be back in such a large burn? And he's talking about the Pine Gulch area. So his area was burned. He wants to know if he moves, or will the elk be back?
And this is a question that I don't have the answer to. How bad did that fire burn? Was it
right? So let's go through the scenarios and talk about whether it just moonscaped burned it, or if it mosaic burned and left some timber. I would say that, depending on when the burn was, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the Pine Gulch burn, but I would say usually about, if we had a burn last summer, I would say it's good to move in there this summer. I've seen burns where you have it and a month later elk and stuff really start moving back in. But usually my idea is that first year after the burn, when you start getting that fresh green growth, that's when the elk will really flock in there. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so there's actually been some research on this as well. And quite honestly, Jay, I'm going to pitch this one to you. You have a really good network of outfitters, friends that are down in Arizona, that they hunt a broad area. There was some research done in Starkey research area up in Washington, and they looked at the timing of how would I put it? They would have a burn. They would do a prescribed burn on the research area, and then they looked over the course of years when elk came back, and more importantly, what elk came back. Did the cows come in first? Did the bulls come in first? Was it September, fall feeding time when the elk came in, or were they using that burn actually better in the spring and the summer? What I would pitch to you, Jay, is maybe this would be. I'm genuinely, from a research standpoint, genuinely interested. You ought to pull together some of your outfitters that have hunted in some of the Arizona areas that have burned, and then ask them, because they've been there for years, what did they see? What was the change? Number one, how soon after the burn did they come? How intense was the burn? Okay, because you're absolutely right. If we look at what goes on in the Kaibab, down in Unit 9 and in some of those other areas, in Coconino, Arizona has an awesome forest management practice down there. They do a lot of
comparatively.
Comparatively. They do a lot of prescribed burns. So most of the burns that they're dealing with down there are light to moderate severity. And most of the time they're going to be light severity. So as well as I do that the elk come right back in. You put some moisture on it, the elk come right back in.
And that's the key, I think, with anything, is put moisture on it and they can come back very, very quickly.
Especially in a light to moderate burn intensity area. Now, when we start going in that really high intensity burn where it sterilizes the soil and it turns into a moonscape, that's going to take years to jump back. Now, number one, a lot of brushy species will oftentimes come in first, like your gooseberry and chokecherries and that type of stuff. Serviceberry, mountain mahogany, some of those brushy species will oftentimes come in first. The Forest Service will also oftentimes come over with aerial seeding, and they'll throw in species of grass and forbs and such that oftentimes have a good root mass. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the highest quality elk forage on the mountain, but they're there to stabilize the soil and stabilize the ash layer. Now, what that means to me is oftentimes when you have those more intensity burns that get moisture on it that bounce back into more shrubby component, oftentimes they can be really good winter areas because that's the type of forage that elk are going to be looking for later on in the winter. Whereas in those light to moderate burn areas where you get some water on it and those cool season grasses and forbs just erupt and jump back and maybe aspen shoots start coming back, well, that's just great forage anytime. And so, yes, when you're talking about the rut, if you've got elk in and around those areas, absolutely you could have good activity during the fall. But what you said in the beginning, Jay, I think is important. Mosaic. If you have, like I said, so yeah. Sorry, you're absolutely right. Starkey's in Oregon. I said Washington, didn't I? Sorry, I was thinking about Washington on something else. Sorry, yeah, you're right. Oregon.
Thanks for keeping us honest, guys.
Yeah. No, that's the beautiful thing about these things because there's interaction. So yes, Citadel Rick, you said it's the largest in Colorado history. Exactly. Okay, I do remember that. The question is are we talking about this person's hunt area was right smack dab in the middle of the massive, high intensity monotypic, burn? Well, if that's the case, go find another spot. However,
I know the spring, I think he's talking about the Spring Gulch. He said Pine Gulch, but the one that down pretty close to the '06 Ranch. I mean, we can see places it's burned, and it moonscaped it. Burned it to pieces.
Yeah, if that's the case, then I'm going to either relocate to another area or at the very minimum, I'm going to relocate to the edges of it. And quite honestly, there are good resources within the Forest Service that you can get a hold of the guys, especially just pick up the regional Forest Service office that handles that area and say, hey, do you guys have an updated what your fire intensity map was for that burn and what the reclamation management plan has been so far, and talk to them and find out where those light intensity and moderate intensity burn areas were. Where was the mosaic pattern on that fire, if there was one? They'll be able to steer you in a good direction, but I'm going to be looking for those areas that burned at a light, maybe moderate intensity that have that mosaic, that patchwork of habitat. Because if you have that and you have the moisture that we have this year, absolutely, I have a feeling that you're going to have some really good potential to have elk activity in there. Now, with that said, you're asking the question on a public forum about hunting a burn. You want to know how many other hunters focus on and gravitate towards hunting a burn area? A lot. So just because it might be really good potential elk hunting, do not for a second think you're going to go in there and not run into a bunch of hunters, because it is a magnet for elk and deer just as it is a magnet for other hunters.
Yeah, for sure. Steven Vasquez, 03. Any point in scouting for an elk hunt now if you've already hired a great guide?
What does that mean?
My answer, it sounds like he's hired a guide and he wants to know if he should go do his own scouting. As a guide myself, I think it's fine if the client wants to go scout and, go look around, and they may find, a bunch of elk or find a specific bull. But one of the challenges, as personally speaking from my perspective being a guide, is when you have a hunter that's out scouting in the summer and our hunt is in the rut, and then they come and say they found a 400-inch bull and they show me the video, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great bull. But do you realize that bull's probably going to be in a different unit in September? So where I'm going with that is, yes, it's fine to do your own scouting, and maybe you would do some good. Maybe you would find a bull that the guide then could then both together tag team and try and stay on that bull. But you also have to understand that you've hired a guide for a reason, and the reason is you've hired him to help you get on elk and get the job done. If you are the type of client that is going to show up and say, well, what are you seeing? I saw these bulls, 2 weeks ago, and we need to be over here. Well, now you're dictating where the guide is going to hunt. A lot of times, and Chris, you can attest to this, guiding in Unit 9 and guiding in Arizona, is guides have areas that they really like to hunt. They know the country, they know the flow of the bulls, they know how the cows move, they know how the pressure of other people. And so when you get a situation where a hunter is starting to kind of, maybe second guess the guide, that's not a good situation. So I would give you the advice, if you hired a guide, know that you should have done your research and picked a great guide. And so any scouting that you would do would maybe just be subsequent scouting and trying to enjoy your hunt, and then put it on the guide and say, here's a bull I found. I can stay on him, and you continue to scout your country. Chris, your thoughts?
No, all of that is good, and I like what you said. Is you hired a guide for their expertise, and that individual, like you said, okay, there are some outfitters that you will book a hunt through an outfitter, and then that outfitter goes and finds a warm body just to go hike around the mountainside with you. So I don't know if that's the case with your outfitter. But even if that's the case, most of the time the outfitters have history in these areas. And even if they just hire a warm body that's never been there, the outfitter's going to meet you, sit down with them prior and say, okay, you guys need to go over this drainage on this bench because this is a little bench over here. There's knowledge there that has played out in their favor year after year after year. And so lean on that and trust it, because you go in with your preconceived ideas on what you see, and what, like you said, Jay, you nailed it. What you see now is not necessarily what's going to happen in September. And just because, that saddle over there looks awesome. Well, yeah, it does. It's beautiful. It looks great. And yes, do elk cross that saddle? Yes, they do. But that's in August because they're over here now. Yeah, but that saddle, we need to go over there. And I mean, Jay, like we joked about it before. I had that one client that his buddy was pissed off at me in Unit 9, Arizona, was just torqued. Thought I didn't know my rear end from my elbow because, quote, well, I hadn't gone out in Unit 9 and located all those little hidden springs in those little natural springs where the water, where the elk would be. I'm like, there are no springs. Just because you go into an idea, you heard something online of this is what I need to see, doesn't necessarily mean that area has that component and that you can exploit that component at the time while you're in there. So if you want to scout, and then the other thing too that makes me nervous, if this is public ground and if it's a remote area, man, just let it be. Don't disturb it. You're paying somebody their expertise. They already know it. So don't you go in and put your scent in there and bump elk and move this, that, and that. How about this? You hired the guy or gal or whatever. If you want to scout and get an idea of the lay of the land, then okay, hike up the trails that you're going to use. Maybe hike up on a high point, just kind of get a lay of the land and just see how you handle that elevation and how you handle that terrain, how you handle the slopes and everything. Can you move? Can you? Is it going to be doable for you? And then I would just get the heck out, because, yeah, like you said, what you see now is not necessarily what's going to be seen later in September. And Jay, if you don't mind, I saw a comment pop up there, and it's similar to one of my other ones. Is there any point to scouting now? Really, does it matter to scout now? What is your thought on scouting now?
Well, before I get into scouting now, I do have a saying. It's get in, hang on, shut up, and let's go.
Get in, sit down, shut up, and hang on, and let's. Yeah.
There's one guide in this camp, and that's me.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right.
And I don't mean that as a jerk, but you hired me, and now we're going to do it my way, and we're going to live and die by the sword. We're going to do it my way. We're going to make some mistakes, but probably at the end of the hunt, it's going to work out good if we just keep going and do it the way I like.
And trust your outfitter. Yep.
Right. So whoever you hired, you obviously did a bunch of research. Now just get in, sit down, hang on, shut up.
But scouting now, would you? What?
Scouting now. So, I mean, in Arizona, speaking specifically about Arizona, what I find, and then I'll talk about the Odd Six Ranch. When you're talking summertime, most of the bulls move anywhere from 15 to 30 miles. There are some bulls that will stay within a mile of where they are all summer, but I think it's a very small percentage. In Arizona specifically, I would say the majority of the bulls would move at least 10 miles to a totally different area than they spend in the summer and rut in a completely different pocket. I know there was a couple bulls, big giant bulls that were up on the park in Unit 9. We all know these same, legendary bulls, and they're getting shot at 35 miles away in the lower part of 7 West. And for 20 years, I guided public land in Arizona, and I saw that over and over and over and over. So what I normally would say is your scouting gets really important. If it's one thing to learn the unit, but when you start scouting and looking at bulls that you're trying to shoot when the season starts, September 1st was about that time frame from right then till the season started when it was the most important time to be in the unit. The whole time knowing that you could find a bull in that first week of September and he's still in his summer ground and he still could make a big move. So that was always a challenge for me I always got there, started scouting on September 1st, and I found a few good bulls, and some of them stayed. Some of them moved a little ways because they were already in their movement, and then some of them just were gone. And I'd find them, in the completely different part of the unit, or a buddy would be in another unit, send me a text of, hey, check out this great bull. And I'm like, that's the one I saw 2 days ago. So scouting in the summer is phenomenal. It gets people fired up and excited about, seeing the bulls and seeing the velvet and seeing, how big of bulls they are, taking kind of inventory of antler growth and what have you. But about September 1st is when you really start pinpointing, elk that you're probably going to be hunting. Same goes with the Odd Six Ranch. I mean, we run trail cameras all summer, and those bulls, they move, they show up, they're not just, some of them basically stay in the same 500-yard or 1,000-yard circle their whole life, but most of them come from a long ways away.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And in the high country, if you're talking about just some of the high country units, same thing. They may just be going basin to basin, but you're like, oh, well, that other basin's only a mile or two from here. Okay, on a map it is, but when you're talking about how much they're the terrain features and the ground they're covering is incredible. And the thing that I wanted to clarify, because I know a lot of people say this to me and have asked, they're like, well, yeah, of course they're going to move if they need to go find cows. No, they're in Grand Canyon National Park, walking through the entire Unit 9, which is a big unit, to go to Unit 7 West. They are walking through thousands of cows. It's not about that they're trying to find a cow. A lot of times they just know where they can be safe, and they've survived and they've done well from a reproductive standpoint, and so they go back to those areas where they feel comfortable, and they will find cows there. So
and
they're
going to territorial thing too. I mean, I see bulls in rubbing on the same trees that they rubbed the year before. It's a territorial thing. I'm convinced of it. Let's jump here to a question. Quest AZ, when bulls are bugling, how tight do you get in before you attempt to call? So I try and get in as close as I possibly can. And if I can get in and put my binoculars on them at 70, 80 yards before I call, that's what I'm going to try and do. My success of calling a bull into what I would call bow range goes way up when I can get into that under 100 yards before I even make a sound. So if I had my preference, I would not even make a sound until I got 80 or 90 yards. And if I could get 60, I would get 60. I can't tell you how many times they've been bugling, I've been able to weasel my way in, and I don't make a sound until they're 50 yards and they come right over. Well, you only have to close 20 or 30 yards and they're at 20 or 30 yards. So fight the urge to call your way into bulls. I was talking with Steve Chappell about it on a podcast a couple episodes ago. Curious your thoughts on that as well, Chris.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, obviously, the habitat that you're in is going to make a big difference. You know as darn well as I do, in Unit 9, in the big timber, in the big pines, good luck getting in within 200 and some odd yards of them sometimes because it's just wide open. But will I get in there and set up and give it a go? Heck yeah, I'll give it a go. But if I can be down, if you're talking about down in the PJ country, or if I'm down in southern Colorado in that oak brush country and there's a bull talking, oh, heck yes, I'm going to try to get myself in there as close as possible. Now, granted, I will caveat this with, it also depends on how you're calling. There's so many people that want to jump to an aggressive style calling strategy that, yes, if you are going to employ an aggressive calling strategy, especially if you're going to be using bull vocalizations and bugles, you start bugling and calling and getting aggressive at several hundred yards, and then you're working your way in. I will bet strong money you're just going to push them. You're just going to be pushing them and following them across the landscape. However, if you get in close, like right in their back pocket, and then you jump into whatever strategy you want, now you might be able to elicit that instinctual response where they have to react and have to come engage you before they get their cows out of there. However, Jay's talked about has his calling style, and you darn well anybody at this point knows my calling strategy and my philosophy. If I'm acting as though I'm a cow or cow with calves, and there is no bull with me, I'm not giving any bull vocalizations, and I'm using the base core fundamental vocalizations that Elk use, those lost mews and assembly mews, I can get away with calling on my way to them to keep them talking and keep them pinpointing, because it actually makes sense that I would be seeking them because that they're responding to me, and it makes sense that they would be moving that way, and it helps me when we're talking thick cover. It helps me hone in on where I need to be and how I can work that wind to my advantage. So yeah, I will always default to getting as close to that animal. If I can pinpoint him and I know exactly where he is, I'm going to default by trying to get as absolutely physically close to possible as I can before calling. But if it's thick and he's only talking sparingly and I don't have a real good fix on him, how you call can actually give you some flexibility on touching base with him and moving in on that animal. So
Next question here. How would you go about doing a 3 to 4 man group with one caller? Personally, I would have 2 shooters out in front, have the other guy back with me and he's out of the game. Have your 2 shooters out in front, have communication ahead of time as to maybe who's shooting first or who has preference, but if this guy has a better shot, have communication ahead of time. And then always remember that bull is going to try and come in and get your wind. So as the caller, you want to try and draw that bull, and you want to be calling upwind so that bull, when he swings, he doesn't swing too far around and doesn't give either of the 2 shooters a shot.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. How do you see the rut being in Arizona this year with all the moisture they've gotten, but coming off such a bad drought? Chris, let you hit that first.
And you and I've talked about this before, Jay. A lot of times, so you got two things. Well, I guess he's asking about the rut. It's all going to be on forage quality. What does the food look like? Down in Arizona. Okay, here's a question to you, pitching it to you, Jay. When did the rains actually start hitting? It's been in the past few weeks, hadn't it, or did it start back in early July?
So it depends on the eastern part of the state. It started early. It started at the end of June,
Okay.
and the eastern part of the state is just blown up. Had incredible rains. That my buddies tell me the feed is waist high. It's as good as it can get.
There you
go. 9 and 10. 10 is better than 9, but 9's really come on. But 9 even into around July 1st was not that great. So body condition, depending on the unit that you were in 9, it was not good. It's rebounded and they've come on pretty good. 10 is better. Eastern part of the state, central around Flag is great. But 9 is very marginal. But it's greened up. But I tend to think the antlers are going to be affected because they were in very poor condition prior to the rains. In eastern part of the state, I think they'll be pretty darn good. In Unit 10, I think they'll be pretty darn good as far as antlers. Not fantastic, but pretty good.
You nailed it as far as what you said about the body condition. That's kind of what I was looking at is, so if you're in those areas that have a little bit higher elevation, maybe some aspen stands and that type of stuff, you can have a component of your vegetation, your grass vegetation and your forbs that are considered more cool season forages. They respond to cooler temperatures, but they respond to moisture very well. And so if all of a sudden you pour the moisture on, they start growing. Doesn't matter. They'll start growing. If they start growing, the nutritional quality of that range condition goes up. The body condition of the cows is probably going to be good. However, like you said, Jay, in Unit 9, now we can get up into the pine area up there, but even in the pine area, a lot of the vegetation understory is blue grama grass. That is a warm season grass. That grows in the summer. If it just grows in the summer, period. And so if the moisture came on while that grass was actively trying to grow and put a seed head up, then it will green up and it'll grow. But if that moisture, because it's going to do something. Sometimes it grows 18 inches tall. Sometimes it only grows 8 inches tall. And sometimes it grows 2 inches tall and throws a seed head because there's just no moisture. But as soon as that grass throws a seed head, it's done growing, period. At this point, it's just putting resources into the root system down below. So in those areas where the rain, if you're in an area that has good cool season grasses and the rain came out, the forage has gone way up. In those areas where you have warm season grasses predominantly, yes, it might green up a little bit, but I have a feeling you're going to be hard pressed to see. It's probably going to be slower to increase that body condition of those cows, and that's the driver right there. The body condition of the cows dictates when they cycle, largely, other than those other factors I talked about a little while ago. So if the forage is turning green and the cows are getting good food and they can make up that previous early season deficit, they'll be good to go.
Yeah, and I've heard New Mexico's in most places is phenomenal. Most of Colorado's phenomenal. Arizona, I think Nevada's pretty darn good. Reports in Montana are a little sketchy. They're having pretty dry up there. Parts of northern Idaho, I think, are pretty dry as well. Got a question here: is the rut triggered by light? Talk a little bit about that photosynthesis whole thing.
Yeah. So again, I'm not going to try to be a jerk, but I'm going to refer people back over to the website. There's an 8-part series on that. So yes, the photoperiod is the driver of hormones. Okay, that is what's going to drive the hormones of those animals. Now, whether or not those hormones flip the switch and the cow goes into estrus is based on if and when she goes into estrus is based on a whole bunch of things. Yes, photoperiod is the driver of the hormones, and no, moon phase does not statistically have anything to do with it. Okay, so just skip the moon phase as far as a rut discussion goes. After the photoperiod triggers the hormones to flow to the level that they need. After that, it's all about body condition, calf, presence or absence of calf, bonding with cows, mature bull around them, length of time that the bull's been around them, etc.
Monty's reporting in from Unit 9 saying Unit 9 is extremely green, was in the triangle last night. Even the well camp looks like a green carpet. Shaggy outdoors.
Of all the years I might not be down, maybe I might need to change my.
I think the rut. Yeah. I think the rut's going to be fantastic in Arizona. I think the antler growth other than the eastern part of the state, I think is just going to be average. We got a question here: are calf sounds the way to go, or is there scenarios that mature cow sounds are necessary? That's a big one.
Yeah, and I know. So, in other words, what he listened to was another podcast that had Joel Turner on it that now is all of a sudden talking about calf sounds. And so, yeah, I mean, again, if you are a subscriber to Roe Hunting Resources Elk module, you've seen where for years I've talked about the difference between mature cow sounds and calf vocalizations and why calf vocalizations can be so good. Now I've done, I don't know how many seminars for ISE and other places, and the entire name of the seminar has been, if the bull, are the elk not talking? Well, then cry like a baby. And it talks about using calf vocalizations to get silent elk to either respond or either vocally respond and or to move your way. And the big part about that is I understand where the discussion went. There's just, that's a problem. There's caveats to this, and this is where just me saying do this provides no context and no basis for you to evaluate the effectiveness of that tool, that strategy.
It's situational. Landscape. You're saying it's situational.
Totally. Correct. And so that's, again, my philosophy is teaching you the why. Why are elk vocalizing the way they are? What are they saying? What do they expect as a response? Now, when people talk about calf sounds, you'll hear people say, well, calf sounds, those high-pitched sounds. Okay, and if we're talking about you and I dealing with an infant, a baby, and the baby's just babbling, okay, well, that's baby talk. Okay, I understand that. But if a toddler or a kindergartner, we don't assume that a kindergartner is going to be babbling with baby talk. No, they actually have words and they know how to communicate. Is their voice a little higher pitched than mine or yours? Of course they are. So they're high pitched. High pitched, it indicates that, yes, it may be an earlier age class animal. But what vocalization are you using? Most of the time, people are talking about a lost mew. Most calves, the vast majority of their vocabulary is lost mews because they're just trying to stay in contact with somebody else. After that, it's all up. Yes, can you get a response with that? Yes. If you use that calf vocalization correctly, can you get elk to move your way? Yes, you can. But just because you're using calf vocalizations isn't the end-all be-all. Because quite honestly, when I talk about a targeted calling strategy, yes, I'm using lost mews, and oftentimes I'm using lost calf mews to get somebody to cut loose and vocalize. But what do? I immediately get myself set up. I get in close, and then most of the time, I am going to transition over to adult assembly mews. I'm going to be sounding like a mature cow. I'm going to dictate what the calf that they hear is doing, and I'm also going to start communicating to the cow, either the cows or the bull that I'm talking to, and I'm going to try to start dictating their activity, what they're doing. I want you to do this. I want you to come to me. So I understand where, and again, this is the benefit of these type of discussions is everybody gets to listen to it and everybody gets to learn from it. Or no, I take that back. Everybody gets to listen to it. And then some people hear something that they like, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's a great, and then they grab it and go, and they make it their own. But if you don't understand the why behind it, you can set yourself up. Let's just say, rather than failure, you can just set yourself up just for just sheer disappointment, because you can go out there and just start using calf vocalizations and not get the results that you're hoping for, and then you think, well, I'm not doing the calf vocalizations right. No, you did them exactly right, but they weren't what was needed in that situation.
The situation wasn't right for it.
Yeah, no, trust me, I do. I use calf vocalizations because they are non-threatening to cows. Bulls do respond to them. Bulls will come into them. I've got an entire video on the website that shows me calling in a bull elk with calf vocalizations. But the other thing, too, that a lot of guys are not talking about is they're not talking about using calf vocalizations, how calves actually vocalize. All they're talking about is using a high-pitched cow sound. Jeez, oh, Pete, Steve Chappell. How many times have we watched Steve Chappell, call in just giant freaking elk? He's using cow sounds. He's a maestro when it comes to executing a cow call. Does he care about whether he's using calf vocalizations or mature cow vocalization? No, he just executes the most sexiest cow vocalization you've ever heard, and just no. I don't know. I could babble on because I listened to that same. I did. I listened to that podcast. I heard the discussion, and I was like, well, they got a part of it, but the rest of it is going to leave people with questions, and that's just unfortunately, unless they come over and watch my stuff.
Got one here. Similar to a second rut with whitetails, do bulls move around looking for cows still in heat later in the month?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. And it happens, and that's why you can get bulls bugling and chasing cows all the way into the 15th of October and even later in some places where you get, second and third cycles. So, yeah, they just move around like a horny billy goat looking for whatever they can get because they only have about 30 days to get her done.
Yeah, and so two things. One, Weedy in the Wild just added another comment that I want to jump on that with that cat vocalization. But yes, what you're talking about is exactly right. So two things. One, sometimes the cow doesn't either cycle on time if the forage quality is poor and she comes in late, and so it can drag out that rut, and so you can have multiple bugling spikes in there and activity. And then, quite honestly, if the forage quality has been awesome for a while, you can have female elk calves being born early or at a high body weight, and they can actually cycle. If they have enough body condition, they can actually cycle that first year, but oftentimes they'll cycle in October. And so, yes, that's why some of those early October hunts can just be phenomenal. Either the animals are bugling because there is estrus smells, pheromones in the woods, or just like turkeys, they're gobbling. They're bugling because all of a sudden all that activity left, and now they're horny and they're like, please, dear Lord, let there be someone else. And so they're out there across the landscape just trying to find somebody that's still cycling in an estrus. But
one thing I want to point out here real fast, Chris, is just to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Both you and I think Joel Turner is a phenomenal caller.
Yes.
He's a great person. We love Joel Turner.
Yeah.
So nothing either one of us, I don't think, has said it. Nothing personally. I don't even know what other podcast, but it doesn't really matter. The key is we can have discussions like this and have a little bit, saying we need more context to just tell people to race out and start making calf sounds. And nothing to do with what we think of Joel Turner. We both, as I know, because we both know Joel, and he's a great person and he's a world champion. So we're not in any way demeaning or taking and saying discrediting what he's saying at all, and not one bit. Seems like maybe I lost Chris here. We've got a question here. We'll wait and see if Chris comes back. Any particular way to reproduce glunking sounds? One of the best ways I've seen to produce glunking sounds is to take, I don't have a tube here with me, take a tube, turn it upside down on the fatter part of the tube, take your hand like this and basically pop it. I've also seen it on the smaller part of the tube. You can do it, and you can play with both sides, and I've seen different tubes make some really good glunking sounds. It says elk nut doesn't talk about calf sounds very much, so everyone has their thing. True. Now back to calf sounds, and I haven't even heard what Joel said about the calf sounds, and we'll hopefully get Chris back here. But I for years used kind of, Steve Chappell kind of calls it baby talk with my diaphragm, and a real calfy kind of real excited kind of call, and done really well with it. Here comes Chris back. And done really well with it. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely use some of those calf sounds. Chris, I was just saying I have had quite a bit of success with calf type sounds in certain situations, and I answered a few questions there while you were going to the bathroom or whatever you're doing. What happened? You lose service?
Yeah, for some reason my phone decided to jump Wi-Fi to some other TV Wi-Fi that's around here that doesn't connect to a phone. Again, this is it's one of those things. Whatever.
You know what? I really like this format though, because normally, like I was saying in the intro, my podcast has always been an audio podcast, but I feel like this is kind of cool because you and I typically answer a lot of questions, but we can also be getting follow-up questions from the person that asked the question. So, I like that scenario. And guys, if you've got questions, go ahead and start putting them here. Got honey, large drainage, early season, bivvy in, what's your play?
Okay, so give me
a large drainage, early season, he's bivvying in, which is, Chris, what you used to do in your high country camp. What is your play?
Okay. Before I jump into
and he says, how are you calling? Are you glassing more or calling more?
All right. Let me touch on one thing that I was trying to say before. So what came out of some of the discussion and what some people have misunderstood before, and that comment was, calf vocalizations don't carry very far, and they're kind of quiet. No, wrong.
They're the opposite.
Yes. Now, when they're in close proximity with their mothers and with the herd, absolutely they are. And when they're close to their buddies, absolutely they are. But I don't know how many videos, man, do you and I both have? I've got some that I'm in the Alpine, and those elk are like 400 yards away, and that's all you can hear is the calves. So, no. And that's honestly how I use them. I don't oftentimes use quiet calf calls. I'm using calf calls to be the loudmouth calf on the landscape, panicked trying to find someone. So no, I'm cranking them. There's a reason why I had Jason Phelps build me a custom mouth diaphragm that allowed me to just absolutely hammer the calf vocalizations. But anyway, I move on.
Speaking of that, have you seen his new external? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I don't have one in front of me, but I think if you're able to mix that in with the diaphragm as well, and you could get several calves, kind of stirred up, and definitely get some elk to come to you. All that.
So yes, I did. I got one. It sounds awesome. It absolutely sounds awesome. I do like the fact that he doesn't have the wide reed that Steve does or that Primos does, and I kind of like a wider reed, but this is not a skinny reed, which I appreciate. But you can see that hole on the tiny. And so it does
Restricted.
restrict. Yeah. So you can't, I can't blow. You have to use light pressure. You have to use light lip pressure. And this one is by design a close range finisher call. It is not designed to get out there and just launch. So if people are thinking that's not what this is for. But no, it's a great little call. So let's get back. Let's get to the question he asked.
Back to JD Glasser, Kong Valley. He's asking suggestions on both 3 and 4 person setup, one caller. We kind of already go back and listen, but anything that I said in that 3 to 4 person scenario with one caller, first of all, walking in the woods with 5 guys, I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe if you're the only one that can call, put the other 2 guys maybe on stand, on a wallow. And it's, 2 guys out in front with bows is good, but walking with 5 of you, 5 different, human scent, I wouldn't recommend it. Have the other 2 guys up glassing and scouting, take the other 2 guys, try and get shots. Chris, anything you can add to that?
Exactly. If you've got that many guys in your hunting party, split up, man. A couple of you go over on this side of the drainage, a couple of you go on that side of the drainage. It's just spread yourselves out just to figure out where the elk are. And hey, great. Maybe both groups get into elk and you're like, hell yeah, here we go. And you get some elk on the ground. Awesome. But at the very least, especially early in your hunt, when you're still trying to find those animals, spread out, man. Don't just put, yeah, I agree. Spread that out. Now, if you're going to all go together, I know it's popular. You can see it on YouTube, how many series you see where all the guys are going together on YouTube. Now, granted, on some of them, they're still spreading out. They're still splitting up, and a couple of them are going over here and a couple of them are going over there. If you're going to do that, then yeah, try to maximize your ability to the best you can. But no, it can be difficult. People are like all the time, oh, elk make a lot of sound. Well, they can, but I've also just watched them go just vanish into nothingness.
You're better off with one caller and one shooter. That's best. If you have 2 shooters and one caller, then fine. But any more than that is challenging. And, as much as we've tried to film hunts and stuff, when you add the caller, the cameraman, and the hunter, 3 guys, that's a lot. So just a rule of thumb, if you can keep it to 2, a caller and a hunter, that's best. 3, but don't go over 3. We've got here... Jay, I noticed the kind of dimpling on my diaphragm after a few days of calling. Is there something to look for on diaphragms to tell you if they're damaged and no longer good? I'm not going to look at it at all. I'm going to go off sound. So, if it's sounding good, I'm going to keep rolling it, but I always have 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 2s, 3s, and 4s in backup. I never just have one call. I always am breaking in new calls, and as soon as my number 1, I just throw it away, go to the number 2, 3. Always have 8 or 10 calls working at any given time. I mean, if you look in what I carry around, I mean, I can blow my 1 call as good as my 10 call, but I might have gone through 30 or 40 calls to find those, top 10. Super important, because you don't want to blow out a reed and then be down and not have confidence. Always have your number 2, 3, 4, 5s, like have them ready to roll, because I hear people saying they use a diaphragm for like a full season. I mean, I use a diaphragm maybe for a week. I'll hunt 30 days in a row and I get a week and done. I'm out. That one goes. I go to the next one. And I don't know if it's my style or the way I'm blowing or what, but, if you get cracking, then sometimes when those diaphragms and that latex starts kind of cracking and you can kind of see little cracks, to me, sometimes those are when it sounds absolute best. But you're also at a fine line there when you go from cracks to holes and then you're done. So, breaking a call in and getting it, really good, there's a fine line where it could switch on you. So make sure you have those backups.
Yeah, Jay, you did a phenomenal podcast a couple of years ago with Jason Phelps about mouth diaphragms and about how they change over time and how you can modify them. You know, you're putting them in soda and that type of stuff. I think it's not a bad idea for you, right? Maybe you were already going to, but you might want to go back and find that episode and re-release it again, because that was phenomenal. I keep, and I don't throw away my diaphragms after each season simply because of that, because I've found, well, last year, I found that sometimes my 1 and 2 year old mouth diaphragms all of a sudden just magically turn on. I'm like, where were you when I need them?
And that's the thing I was going to say too. It's one thing to blow a diaphragm out. I'll throw that one away. Back in the day, like Chris, you were with Primos. Mr. Will used to send me boxes of like literally a box of 100 of each of the different calls, and was asking for feedback and, just running through them. And even the ones that I didn't like, I would put in a separate bag and I would label them, not ready yet. And I would soak those in, Coke and Sprite and Dr. Pepper, different time frames, trying to loosen that latex up. And then all of a sudden, maybe the next year I'd pull that bag of 30 or 40 out, and 5 or 6 of them, the latex would be perfect.
Yep.
So I don't want people thinking I'm throwing them away. I'm throwing them away when they crack and they break, the latex breaks up, then they go in the trash. But I got stacks in my box of literally hundreds of diaphragms, and I typically start going through them, and I might find one that's 5 years old, and for whatever reason, the latex has broken down enough that I can make the sounds that I'm looking for. Specifically, when I'm looking for the cow sounds and the tone that I'm looking for, sometimes those older diaphragms just are the ticket.
Yeah, they're awesome. Yep.
Scent control is so important, yet some of us require sunscreen, which I do. Bug repellents for mosquitoes. Do you have any recommendations on unscented products to help with sun and bug protection? I want to add one, or answer one thing of this real fast, is sun protection is something that I think, I'm fair skinned, so I have to wear unscented sunscreen, and I try and do it as much as I possibly can. My wife would say I don't do it near enough. The other thing about bug spray, here's an interesting thing. I'm curious if anybody else has heard the same thing, but years and years ago, this is like 20 years ago, I had guys in eastern Arizona that they, not even when there were no bugs, they would get Cutter mosquito bug spray. They'd be spraying down with it, spraying their whole body. And they swore. Now, I would walk up to them and it's just like, oh, it smells like mosquito spray. They were wearing specifically Cutter bug spray. They swore that by spraying that down, that they would have elk close to them in lots of situations, and the elk wouldn't smell them. Well, I thought that's a bunch of bull. I started doing it, had the same response. The only thing that I could think is that the elk smelled that, but didn't associate that smell. What we smell is unnatural mosquito spray. It smells like chemical. For whatever reason, and I have no idea why Cutter makes a difference, but those guys to this day still swear by it, and they spray down every time with Cutter bug spray, and they say that the elk don't associate that smell with human. What are your thoughts on that, just on the face value?
Well, and it'd be very interesting to see where this was happening too, because I could absolutely see a scenario. So real quick, bighorn sheep. I drew 2 different sheep tags in Colorado, in the unit, a ram tag and a ewe tag. And this particular unit sees a lot of recreational hikers. And when I first went in to get my ram, I acted like a hunter, and it was difficult. And I finally pulled it off. I got a nice ram. The next year, I heard someone say, no, don't act like a hunter. Go in there and just walk around, wear civvy clothes with your bow, and just act like a hiker. And that's what I did. Literally, you just walk within like 30 yards of the stinking sheep. So I got my ewe. So there's a point to what you're saying, or maybe if there's a high level of human activity in the area and they're hikers that have zero impact on elk. I mean, hikers don't bother elk. You know what I mean? Hikers are predictable. Hikers are, innocent bystanders that are no threat. And so maybe in some of these areas they smell that and they're like, oh, it's just another hiker. Never mind, moving on. And they ignore it. However, there is in the whitetail industry, there's a company that sells what they call nose jammer. And it's supposedly this scent that blocks it's just vanilla scent. It smells like vanilla. And it's supposed to do the exact same thing. It's supposed to cover or overwhelm the senses of a whitetail to where he doesn't associate that smell with a hunter. I had one of my hunters, he didn't tell me he was doing it. One of my hunters was wearing it. I'm walking, I'm like, did he use his wife's shampoo? What did you smell lovely? What is that? It was like, what? And he's sitting there going, I'm not wearing it. I'm like, are you wearing cologne? He's like, no, I'm not wearing anything. I'm all scent free. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, I can smell you from here. I'm like, it took us forever to figure out what it was. It's like, well, I sprayed the stuff down with nose jammer. I'm like, give me that thing. I'm like, that's what it is. It's thinking vanilla. So I don't know, man. I mean, you know darn well if the elk are going to smell you, they're going to blow out. So I guess if you have no choice, give it a try. I don't know.
I would tell you, I used it for a few years and actually thought it works pretty good. I actually had elk that I'm like, that elk should be running away, and
he's not.
So I'm just telling you, they swore by it. I've used it a little bit, but back to the scent stuff, like, guys, it really doesn't matter. When they're downwind, they're going to smell you. So there's, maybe a period where they won't smell you as much, but I mean,
here's the thing. If you're going to hunt out of a camper or out of a base camp where you can have, because I'll carry several quart jars or jugs of either, I love Primo Silver XP or Dead Downwind. Both of those seem to do extremely well. I really do love it's not Silver XP anymore. It's like, what do they call it? The Control Freak or whatever it is. Yeah. It works really, really well. And most of the time I use it just to knock my own stink down so I don't have to smell myself if I can't keep up with laundry or showers. But if you have the ability to do that, that's fine. But if you're going to go hunt in the backcountry and you're going to hike all the way in, you're not going to control your scent. It's not going to happen. So just play the wind the best you can.
We've got CC Pizza Bro. Back to, he wants hunting a large drainage, early season, bivvy in. What's your play? How are you calling? Are you glassing more or less? What are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, it depends on the terrain. If you're way the heck back in there and you've got a lot of alpine and open meadows and opening areas where you can climb to an elevated spot and use the glass, your binoculars or spotting scope to figure out where the animals are, figure out where they're coming and going, where are they feeding? Are they feeding there each night, each morning? Where are they going into the timber to bed? When are they going in there? If you can use your eyes to pattern a group of animals and see a consistent, kind of cycle in an area of operation, spend a couple days doing that. I mean, Jay, you love sitting behind glass. I hate it. I despise it, but I still will do it if I'm in those alpine areas because it's an advantage. If you can figure out what their daily cycle is and no one's in there bothering them, spend a couple days, watch them, figure out what they're doing. Because then you'll know I need to be right there where that little finger of trees comes out, and then then there's that deadfall right there. I mean, it seems like every time they come out, they're going 30 yards right by that deadfall. Well, that'd be good information to have, wouldn't it? Or for darn well that they don't come out of the timber or in the morning. They don't leave the alpine until 9 o'clock. Why is that? Because they're waiting until the thermals shift. And then they're putting the wind in their face. Then they're dropping into the timber. Well, it's good to know that because you try to insert yourself in there too early, and all of a sudden your scent switches and goes right up to their face. Well, you're busted. So use glass to your advantage. But if it's all just thick timber, I'm getting up crack-o in the morning. Like I don't treat a backcountry hunt any different than I do a camper hunt. in Arizona. Jay, you and I have talked about it before. I'm going to be out there 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to get myself in a spot where I should be able to hear a long distance. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to listen, try to figure out where everybody is. I might throw out a call or two just to see if I get a listener's response. And then in the dark, I'm going to try to cut the distance and move in. I'm not going to change my tactics in one at all. My tactics are based on behavior and how to exploit that behavior. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Question here, 6 with sticks. With the popularity of OTC units, if a guy wants to move to a limited quota area, when's the best time to look at it if you're hunting OTC? I want to change areas, but figuring out which limited quota area to go to. I think you almost have to sacrifice a season and do the research ahead of time, maybe pick a couple of different units and maybe just hunt your OTC for 2 or 3 days. But I think if you're going to make the move, at some point you have to go ahead and jump and go pre-scout, go take some hikes, go camp overnight, go listen for some bulls, go try and monitor, people at trailheads and what's going on. I think, unless you have a buddy that can do it for you while you're hunting, the only way for you to truly really know is if you go and look at it yourself. So I think you're going to have to sacrifice. And guys, feel free, keep asking questions here. Chris, I think you're okay to go. Let me know if you've got a timeline here. But I know we've got some more questions that I got on Instagram. And if you had any questions, dive in there, Chris.
Yeah, I've got a list of them here, too, that I can touch on. But no, you know what, you made a good point, because what I was going to say is the time to do that is in the off season. I mean, you got plenty. There's so many resources, online resources out there now that you can get in and pick apart information. But you bring up a very good point. It's not a bad idea to say, okay, fine, I'm going to take this weekend and, I'm going to look at unit XYZ. Or maybe you've got 3 units that you're toying around with, depending on how many preference points you have. You might just want to go out and say, okay, what does it look like? Where are people parking? Where are people accessing? Maybe take a day hike and just go be a hiker. Obviously you can't bring a bow or anything like that. Just become a hiker and just go up onto some glassing points and just listen and just kind of get a feel for what you think. I think that you can do a lot of work in the off season to figure out exactly which ones you want to narrow down and which ones you want to try. But I think if he's at that point where he kind of has an idea of what unit he's looking at, what you just said is not a bad idea. Go in there this season and just kind of get a feel for what it looks like and talk to some of the guys. I know who this individual is. He's a very personable individual. So there's no reason in the world, go in on a Sunday when a lot of people were probably going to be coming out to head home and just talk to them. Hey, how'd it go? I don't have a tag in here. I'm thinking about maybe someday, maybe hunting here. I'm no threat to you in your hunt right now. I'm just curious what you saw. What did you experience? What did you see? What did you hear? What's it like? It's not a bad idea.
Got a great question here from Zach Shannon 13. I keep having bulls come in frontal. I identify the doorway and try to set up in a good spot, but they always come in frontal and they don't turn broadside. Any suggestions? Before you answer that though, tell people what the doorway is.
All right, it's just basically you'll hear people talk all the time about the elk hang up at 80 yards or 60 yards or 80 yards or 100 yards, where they would always come to my calling, but they would hang up. It's not that they're hanging up. What I kind of coined as the doorway or the doorway principle is, if you think about how you walk through your house, you have open rooms, you have hallways, and then from that hallway or from one room to another, you have a doorway. And if someone calls to you from the other side, from a different room, and you go to meet them, it's not uncommon for us to even pause in the doorway of that room instantly, in milliseconds. Look, try to make eye contact, assess, and then move forward. Elk are no different. They're going to move across. They know you're there. You are in their kitchen, their feeding area. You are in their bedroom, their bedding area. You're walking their hallways, those trails that are going back and forth. Okay, so you're in their house. They know their house. They've been there before. Trust me. And so as they're moving across the landscape, there are going to be places where they should be able. I get to this bench, or I get to this patch of timber where it kind of opens up a little bit, or these transition areas where they should be able to step in and I should be able to see where that animal I hear talking. Those are the doorways. Where is that transition between cover, terrain? Where's the first place an elk from over there that's coming my way should be able to lay eyes on where I'm at, because that's what they want to do. That's the doorway. Yeah, that's where they're going to stop. That it doesn't matter where you are. That's where they're going to stop. Period. Whether you're 100 yards from it or 10 yards from it, they're going to stop there. But guess what? It's up to you to put yourself in range of that spot. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't hang up. You chose the bad setup. You chose the wrong spot on the map to set up. So
okay, they're coming in front on. What can you do different?
Yeah, and so Zach, I had yours written down here too, so I'm glad you chimed in and asked it again. Bottom line, I've said this before. My calling philosophy, what do I say? Call them to your toes. They're right here. Right there. I can hear them swallowing. Okay. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of frontals and hard quartering two shots. So in my opinion, you've got two options. Number one, get your bow set up, your arrow and broadhead set up, designed to take advantage of that. A frontal shot properly executed I don't like taking a frontal shot beyond 20 yards just because the animal can react. But you've watched my videos where I've killed elk and they're frontal or hard quartering, and I have my broadhead, iron will broadheads with a medium to heavy arrow. That arrow's going stem to stern, going right through them, and it can be an absolute deadly shot opportunity. If you don't want to do that, the other option is to go ahead and let that animal spook, or let that animal come in, and if he's going to stop broadside or whatever, go ahead and let him see you at the last little second. Just go ahead and draw. Yes, he's going to spook. He's going to turn and he's going to wheel. A lot of times those bulls they'll spin, they'll trot off a couple steps and stop, and they'll look back. That's where you can get a quartering away shot. Okay, there's pluses and minuses of both of those. Will he spin and will he take off and just leave the county? Well, he might. Will he blow up and spin and turn broadside? He might. Or does he just go out there and turn and he's like a hard quartering away, where you've got to get that arrow just right, otherwise you're hitting guts and everything else. So it is tricky. Now, if you can, and I don't know what you're doing when that moment occurs, when they come in, because if you just stand dead stone still and you don't make a sound, a lot of times those bulls are going to come in and they're going to look and they're going to stand there. They're going to stand there. They're going to stand there. They're going to look. They're going to stand there. And if you go back to the elk module and what I talk about in some of this stuff, when they break their focus and break their concentration, there's an opportunity to call, or just stand there and let them continue to seek. Because sometimes they'll stand, and they're like, well, I know darn well I just heard some. Let me take a couple more steps. And if you are a subscriber, you've watched those videos where the bull comes in, he stops right in the doorway. I don't move, I don't say a word, and the bull just keeps right on going, and he walks right by me broadside at 10 steps. At that point, as he slips by me, oftentimes, and if you have your bow set to where you can just slowly and smoothly draw your bow, a lot of times as he's moving and he's moving his antlers through the trees or whatever, put the bow right at him and you just draw your bow just nice and straight, they don't even perceive that movement. And if they do, they just stop and they look, and it's done. 10 yards, done.
Yeah, and another thing, too, that I've done is if they're approaching but they're not to the doorway yet, and I'm not going to make them stop, my last call will be further, I would say, away from them, from the doorway. So the last time they heard me, I'm further away, so that hopefully they'll come to the doorway, make a quick stop, and continue because they think it's 40 or 50 yards on past, and then let them continue on. And a lot of times one of the biggest problems is when they're standing there and they're looking, is guys can't hold still enough. If you can literally just sit there and do not move, yep. They want it so bad most of the time. They're going to look, left, right, look, maybe bugle, looking for you, don't make a peep. They're going to then continue on. You're at full draw and you let it go.
And this guy, EH, gets loop from the last call location as the bull is closing. Very similar to what you're talking about. The issue is depending on the terrain and depending on the vegetation, if it's thick enough for you to be visually blocked, that can be good. But don't discount the fact that if you make a move and you snap a twig, you are now the next location. Because
right,
that elk heard...
He's listening for that. He hears something, and then the last place he hears that, now you've changed that doorway.
She must be over there then. Okay, exactly. So, yes, moving can work. I just would rather trust my setup and trust myself and just, let him come and stand right there in front of me. Well, heck, I've got that video on the strategies and action section called 108, that bull that had the ear tag down in Arizona. He comes in. He's like 7 steps in front of me, standing. I'm in the middle of nowhere with just a camera in front of me. He walks up, screams in my face, looks, and just turns and just trot, and then he just turns, and now he's broadside, and there he goes. There's so many examples on the elk module and that strategies and action section of this issue right here. But if you watch things unfold, you will see the elk will oftentimes present themselves. Most of the time, we are so happy and anxious that we finally got a bull to come in that we feel as though we have to kill him at the
right then.
Like the millisecond he stops, I gotta kill him. No, hold on a minute. He just walked 150, 200, 300 yards away through all that timber. He's coming to find you. He thinks nothing's wrong. Just let the situation play out. Come, let it play out, and see what happens.
Zach says, every time I stayed very still and quiet, but they stayed laser focused, but then whirl and get out of dodge. I guess I just need more call-ins and practice. Thank you guys for taking the time. I might say that maybe there's a chance you've called too much and you've given him too precise of a location so he knows exactly where you should be. I kind of like the elk to not know exactly where I'm at. I like an elk that's coming and wanting to know where I'm at. A lot of times they're grunting and kind of making small little sounds, and they're trying to get me to respond, but I won't. Let them keep coming. If they're coming to the doorway and whirling, you've either, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, or your opinion, but you've either picked the wrong place to set up where they see you. You've either picked a place where the wind is blowing into the doorway instead of the doorway, blowing the right way, or you've called too much and they have a precise, exact location where they think you are. That's a problem.
Yep, all the above. And so, to his point, yes, there's no two ways about it. Repeated experience on call-ins is going to help. And so, don't get frustrated. The fact is, you're getting elk to come in on you. I mean, you're having multiple call-ins, and the elk are coming in. Now, what I want you to do is take a look at where your setup is. Because, yes, I have gotten away with some phenomenally open setups before. However, I have talked about, and I show that when I'm choosing, there's multiple places on the landscape where if I called from this place, the doorway's here. But if I went over here and I called from this place, well, the doorway's there. So I can actually choose. The elk's over here, and he's coming this way. I want him to come this way. I've got a 50-50 choice. Can I set up against that really gnarly, broken up, mass, just weird, blow down and contrasty thing that completely helps break up my outline? Or do I go over and set up against that young pine that's this big, dark green thing, and here I am with my tan camouflage, like, bam, right in front. Okay, it's because camouflage, and this is a different one. I won't dive into it, but your reflective signature of your clothing also goes a long way. So if you have light-colored clothing, it doesn't matter if it's good camouflage or not. If I'm wearing ASAT and I'm standing against a dark-colored tree, it doesn't matter that my outline is broken up. I stand out like I'm like a neon sign in front of that dark-colored tree. However, if I just gone over here and I stood in front of that ponderosa pine in the trunk of that tree, or the trunk of that tree, or this big nasty dead blowdown, suddenly now the colors are similar and my outline's broken up. You can have two complete, wildly different perceptions by that animal as he comes into that setup.
Chris, I want to point out here, and guys, feel free, keep putting your questions there. You have a chance to win a New Mexico elk hunt. If you didn't draw a hunt this year, don't worry. There's still ways to get a tag and get out in the field. Not only are there leftover and OTC opportunities, but if you join the Go Hunt Insider with my promo code JScott by August 31st, 2021, you're going to be entered in to win $1,500 worth of Kuiu gear. You're also going to get 10 entries into Go Hunt's Big Summer of Elk giveaway, where you could win a 2022 New Mexico elk hunt. They're also giving away $15,000 in gear. As you know, the Go Hunt Insider is the one platform for finding great hunts, researching units, e-scouting, planning your hunt, and now the incredible value of the desktop and the online maps, both for iPhone and Android, at no extra cost. So now they are not charging more to become an Insider member. You guys have been getting a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card just for signing up. So it's $99. Now they're adding maps to that. So at no extra charge. And sign up at GoHunt.com, use the promo code JScott, and get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. Also, don't forget, when you call into whether you talk to Cody Nelson or you order from the gear shop, if you use the JScott promo code, you're going to get a 10% discount on the products there. So, Chris, we've got a question here. Will a decoy help with drawing a bull past the doorway?
It can. It depends on the decoy that you're using. However, I will say, now, I'm going to give a caveat to this, and this is an honest one. Your calling strategies and how you call can play a part in whether or not a decoy is going to help you. So if on the way I particularly call, my philosophy in my strategies, I have had numerous subscribers give me feedback when they've used decoys, and they have all come back with the exact same thing that I think. Ditch the decoy, work the setup. If you can get a good setup, if you have your setup right and you are calling the way I usually call, 99.9% of the time you do not need a decoy, and quite honestly, you're better off not having a decoy, because then they do see it. And depending on the decoy that you're having, and especially some of these over-the-counter units, if they're pressured, a lot of times they'll come in, they'll see it, and then they're like, oh, there she is. Wait a minute, why isn't she moving? And it's just this static, this completely fixed item on the landscape that isn't behaving naturally. Now, and so if you're doing a solo setup, it can be difficult with a decoy. Now, heads up decoy I like, because it is just the head and the top part of the neck of a cow elk. So you can make that move. It can be movable and it can be dynamic. That helps. Heck, a buddy of mine has the Ultimate Predator decoys, where it's the front on of a cow elk and you can shoot through it. It's a great looking decoy. It works very, very well, especially if you're mobile and you're moving. I have tested it out before he bought the company. I tested it out extensively, and what I found was a lot of the mature bulls, if they saw that out there at 50, 60, 70 yards, they just pause and they stop, because it's the cow. The cow was just calling. He just made up 80% of the distance. Okay, now what do you want to do? And so he's waiting for her to make a move. He's waiting to see what she wants to do. And so he just stands there, and the longer she doesn't do anything, the longer he's like, this ain't right. I'm out. And they just go. So if you are a mobile type hunter and you want to, maybe you don't want to call as much. Maybe you just want to, you've got bulls that are bugling and you just want to slip in and try to sniper one. That Ultimate Predator decoy is a great one, because you can put that on your bow and you can stalk and move. And that mobile aspect of that particular decoy, I think, makes it exceptionally deadly. But if you're going to be a solo hunter and you just want a static one, maybe look at that Montana decoys. They make that elk rump. It's just the butt decoy, the elk butt. If you can, set it off maybe 20, 30, 40 yards behind you and upwind of you. But don't buy, and make sure that you still don't want that elk to be able to see that decoy from 100 yards away. You still want that elk to be able to see the decoy once it hits the doorway, because you want that decoy hopefully to help pull it past you. Well, put it upwind, so if the elk does go that way, then it can go upwind of you. But if the elk just stands there and stares at it, at least maybe his eyes are on the decoy and you can draw or make a better shot. But I'm telling you, there's so many people that have gotten a hold of me and they're like, dude, what you said and how you said and called and your setup, no, ditch the decoy, because the decoy should just not have the decoy. He would have just walked right on through. So it's just like any other tool. It can help you in the right situations. It can be a detriment in the others. I like being highly mobile and just being flexible. So most of the time, I'm just working the setup.
We'll take a few more questions here, guys. When calling Roosevelt bulls, do you think calling sequences differ at all? I have no experience. I've never even seen a Roosevelt elk, so I can't really answer that. But I would think the scenarios are very similar, other than the timber's a lot more dense, so you're probably going to hear a bull bugle and you're going to think that they're further away than they are, right? Because the sound's going to be muffled by the trees. They're actually going to be closer. But Chris, any experience with Roosevelt elk?
Yes, but unfortunately mine were late season. So it was I don't know if Washington still has it, but when I was in the military there, the only time I could hunt was, I think it was a December season on the Olympic Peninsula. So it was just a complete spot and stock hunt. But no, elk are elk. I mean, the behaviors and the vocalization are extremely similar across every species. The issue is how they interact with their habitat and the hunter/predator pressure that they experience on a daily basis. So how they interact with their habitat, and then where they find those sanctuary areas. But the vocalizations are the same, the setups are the same, my strategies are exactly the same.
We've got how to call a bedded solo bull through open sagebrush country.
I don't know. Now, when you say open sagebrush country, please tell me that there's at least spotty pinyon juniper out there, because if it's open sagebrush country, man, I mean, all the elk has to do is just stand up and look and be like, I'm not seeing anybody. Now, I guess at that point, maybe this is where, if you have a couple guys, say you've got one shooter and you've got a couple buddies with you, then maybe take a couple buddies that have the full body style, Montana decoys. You go 200 yards out in the back, and they just stand there looking like a couple elk sitting on the landscape, and then you're closer and have them call, and maybe he stands up and comes across. But no, open sagebrush like that, man, dude, that's going to be tricky, man. I think you're going to have to use terrain. You're going to maybe, quite honestly, sometimes it's just going to be one, if it's deep, tall sagebrush that can hide you, man, maybe spot and stalk is the way to go.
If you're Dar Colburn, you don't even have to duck. You just sneak up there on them and shoot them in their bed in the sagebrush.
There you go.
Just got a text from the Latvian Eagle, Giannis Patelis, saying he can't hear me. Curious if you guys this whole hour and a half have not been able to hear me. And Giannis, we need your production quality here. Chris and I are kind of winging this. This is our first Instagram Live.
I can hear you just fine.
But good to have you, Giannis. I'm glad you're listening. And look forward to seeing you one of these days. A little unknown fact about Giannis. He actually used to guide with Dara and I down in Arizona, and we had a lot of fun with him. So good to see that he's tuning in. What class of bull can I expect to shoot in 6A in Arizona? I assume he's talking about the archery hunt. One of the things about 6A is I want to say there's like 700 bull tags and 900 cow tags, give or take. I think there's like 1,500 people in the unit. It does have probably more elk than any unit in the state, but tons of people. So that's never been a unit that I've focused on. But as far as class of bull, I think this year the antler growth will be average. I think you can expect a lot of elk, young 5 points and 6 points, 260, 270 up to, probably 330. And I think there will be a few 340, 350, maybe a little bit better bulls around. But if that unit did not get the amount of pressure that it did, it would hold really big elk. It just gets hunted so much. And it's a pretty darn good late hunt, so those elk don't get a chance to grow up. Chris here, what are Chris's archery plans for Colorado this year?
Try to figure out what I want to do for this year. That's my archery plan right now. Try to figure it out. Yeah, I've got a couple. So I did not draw. Well, I guess not obviously. I did not draw a limited tag this year. And I haven't shared this with a lot of people. Jay and I have talked about it. So I'm still trying to figure out some lung issues. I don't know if it's long COVID that I'm dealing with. Largely, it's been like, or maybe I just developed asthma as I became an adult. I don't know. We're trying to figure it out right now. But it seems like I got about 50% lung function these days. And so hiking into some remote stuff might not be in my near future. I don't know. But I've got several over-the-counter units that I can go to. I could go back to my old stomping grounds. I haven't been there in a couple years now since, last year I didn't hunt elk for myself at all. So I've got that. But then I've got two other over-the-counter units that I've been looking at to go hunting with buddies that I have not gone stomping in these areas in a while. And I'm very curious about going and doing that. And then kind of eyeballing some other options as well. But right now, dude, I'm serious. It's August 1st, and I am as prepared as this much. So we'll see. We will see.
It says, Chris, I'm bow hunting Southern Colorado Unit 77 the last week of September. Be aggressive or sit water?
I have no idea, and I hate to say that. I don't know. I don't know how many elk you're going to have in your area. I don't know what the age class of those elk are going to be. I don't know whether you got bulls with cows and then satellites, or you just every bull had, it's like one bull and 4 cows, one bull, 3 cows, and everybody's locked down. I don't know what the hunter pressure is going to look like. Give it now with the water set, and this is parallel to a part of a question from Sterling earlier about being this wet, sitting wallows, or is it better to hunt feeding areas? Like we said in the beginning, with this much moisture on the landscape, if your area is wet, wallow sits may be less productive than it would be in a dry year. And maybe you focus more on those feeding areas in the early, in the mornings and the evenings and such. I don't know, man. I don't know what you're going to be dealing with. And I think if you come to, again, my philosophy is, I talk about all the time, the valley of the 10 bulls. I walk into a valley and there's 10 different groups of elk with 10 different bulls. I want to have the tool sets and the skill sets to be able to work every single bull in that valley, however that bull needs to be worked. So if you develop your skill sets now and you understand your calling and what you're saying and why, you will be flexible and you will be better able to be dynamic on that landscape as the conditions unfold in front of you. So it's about the best I can do. I apologize.
Got a question here. I might add one thing to that. If you're finding wallows, let that dictate. If you're finding smoking hot wallows and you can tell they're pounding them, change your tactics. If you get there and you're coming across different wallows and they haven't touched it, then you've got to switch. But over at the ranch, when Hunter and I notice we get 2 or 3 days of really warm weather and we hammer our cameras on the wallows to try and capture as much content as we can. Guys, I encourage you to check out the Odd Six Ranch Instagram page. We're going to have an unbelievable content season this year with the cameras we have at Odd Six. I'll also have it on the J Scott Instagram. But, when they get to wallowing, they're on them they are on them.
Real quick before you get off that, though, and this goes back to fresh sign, and I had answered that question earlier on my page. People were asking about fresh sign with wallows, and what Jay just said is key. But the question is it fresh? Just because it seems milky, the water in the wallow seems milky, does not necessarily mean it's overly fresh. So what you need to do every time you walk up to a wallow, what I do, I'll take a stick and I'll stir the mud up a little bit. Does that thing just silt up and just completely silt up and the silt just hang there for like a long period of time? Or does it stir up mud and then just settle right back to clear water? Because if you touch it and it stir it up and it just instantly turns to chocolate milk and it just hangs there, man, an elk could have been there 2 days ago. Versus you stir it up and it just immediately settles out. Okay, well, you know that it settles out pretty quick. Well, then all of a sudden you walk over to this wallow and not only is there wet mud on the vegetation, it's still stirred up. Okay, that's being used. That's fresh. That's being churned over a lot. Now, hopefully you're finding elk tracks in it, not just muddy water, because bears love to go wallow around in those wallows as well. But just use that. Go stir it up. And just evaluate how long does it take for that water to settle out, because that will give you a better indication in the area how recent was an animal in this water.
Guys, AZ Gunner 2020 says, Jay, love the format. Been doing chores and rocking this on my JBL speaker throughout the house. Hope you do it more often. I would like to hear from you guys if you like this format or if you like my standard audio podcast. I felt like, I'm 6 years, almost 800 episodes. Going on Mark McMahon's real estate podcast last week, we did an Instagram live, and I thought, well, why don't I do it with this?
Yeah.
If you guys really like this format, let me know if you like it. If you don't like it, that goes with anything that I'm doing specifically. I love to hear from you guys, so feel free to reach out. We've got a question here. What situation dictates you guys to challenge a bull? I'd like to kind of address that first, Chris.
Go ahead.
Let me stand. Okay, I'm up on my soapbox. Okay, so for the
challenge bugle doesn't exist.
Okay, so I'm going to say for the Arizona and New Mexico guys that are listening, I got to watch what I say here. I believe that there are some calling strategies that work very well on young bulls that are curious when you bugle at them and they want to come. And I agree that there are calling strategies on big, giant, mature bulls that will come and knock your head off. But my experience, 20 years guiding on public land in Arizona, is that when you come to Arizona with the idea that you're going to come blow their hat off and you're going to come look for the one bull in the unit that wants to play and wants to bugle and have a challenge back and forth, you are going to get your butt handed to you as far as calling elk in.
Consistently.
Now, consistently. You might find the one bull or the two bulls that wants to come and fight and do the whole thing. And I will argue with anybody in the world about this. When you come to Arizona, you are dealing with elk that have a higher age class than a lot of different states. You come and your bugle does not sound perfect, and you don't blow it at the right time, and it doesn't sound good, you are going to do yourself more harm than good. And if people want to have a whole podcast where we can argue about that, that's fine. But I'm telling you, so I've taken some criticism. I'm going ahead and just air it all out here right now. I have taken some personal messages and some criticism that I don't know what I'm talking about, because I guided in 20 years in Arizona, and I've hunted reservations, and I watch elk every day on a private ranch. One thing I will tell you is maybe all that's true, okay? But my at-bats and the amount of exchanges and the amount of elk that I've seen, heard, called, watched, witnessed, my at-bats is probably higher than anybody in the country. So when Chris talks about behaviors, when he talks about some of this stuff, I've seen a lot of this stuff for 20 years in Arizona, and then at the ranch, I watch elk for 45 days straight, morning and night. So when I tell you, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody specifically, but coming to Arizona and thinking you're going to be blowing challenge bugles and that's your strategy, I promise you a better strategy across the board is going to be coming in sweet talking, cow calling, starting with that first. I'm not saying that there's not time when bugling might not work and challenging a bull doesn't work, but for the most part, come in sweet talking, you're going to do a lot better. Chris, I've dug a hole for myself. Pull me out of it.
Okay, so if we go to his question, when would we do that? I will only, and I'm going to use your terminology, or the challenge a bull. When I am literally down to my last day or two of the hunt, I have found a bull that is absolutely the last. He's the only bull that I want to kill. Period. End of discussion. That's the bull I want to kill. Okay, so I'm on that bull. No other option is acceptable. I am down to literally my last day or last couple sits or efforts on this bull. I have already tried everything else that I teach and talk about. I've used every behavioral interaction I can up until that point, and they've all failed. And the bull ends up getting himself in a situation where all of the factors necessary, I can get in close, I can get next to his cows, but all the traditional, he's asking this question, and guaranteed he's listened to every other person out there that loves to bugle at elk about and knows exactly what scenario they talk about. I'm not going to try to, and I'm not going to say challenge the bull. I'm not going to try to be a threat to him with bugles or with a big honking gnarly dominant bugle, unless that's literally I've got no other play. I literally have no other play, and I'm getting ready. That bull's either going to walk out of my life forever, or I'm just packing up and going home. Now, with that being said, how many times have I done that? I can think of a couple of times where there's been numerous times where I've used bull vocalizations to call in a bull, but they have not been challenge, quote unquote, bull bugles. Because again, and I joke about this, but I'm dead serious, challenge bugle doesn't exist. And I can think of one time, and that was in Unit 49, Colorado, when I had a limit tag, and I was literally getting ready to go home. And I was dealing with a bunch of small bulls, and all of a sudden a holy freaking, that type of bull showed up, and he had a whole bunch of cows, and they were moving down the mountainside, and I had a split set. I was like, there is no time to play. There is no time to try to, I've got to get this guy to stop and at least stop and try to head me off. And so I tried it. He did. He stopped, and he did exactly what he normally did. He stopped, he delayed, but he stopped in a place where it wasn't going to give me a shot. He sat there, bugled, strained, looked around, turned around, grabbed his cow, down the hill, away they go again. What Jay said there was perfect. There are a lot of people that talk about elk calling that, and we don't even need to name names because they're all very prominent, vocal social media people that give.
It's nothing personal.
Correct.
It's just a totally different style. And
I'm friends with most of them.
20 years of experience in a state, I think I have a way to say it doesn't work.
Yeah, no. So he disqualified. So Best Matt disqualified. Yeah, no, you're right, man. For me, it's going to be a last resort. because, and I've talked about this before. Now, again, let's just real quick. I'm friends with most of those other guys. I'm like personal friends with them. I love them, and they're good callers. But every single one of them comes out and says the exact same thing. This is the type of bull I want to play with. And so when I give my example of the Valley of the 10 Bulls, they're going into that valley and they're trying to find the one bull, maybe, that wants to play that style of game. I'm not that philosophy. So, yes, Vestmat. So, in my opinion, for me to get to that aggressive level, I'm going to do exactly, it's got to be, there's literally, I've thrown the entire kitchen sink at him, and I am down to the where I am either going to leave, I've got to go home, or this bull is going to leave my life forever. And so I have there's no reason why not to try it. Because if I try it too early and it doesn't work and I blow that bull off the mountain, great, now what? You know what I mean? I'd rather have, like Jay, perfect at-bats. I would like to try to work that bull multiple times over multiple days with multiple strategies before I go all in and just crack him across the nose with a baseball bat.
I did see something here in the question. Someone talked about raking, and I can't agree more. For me, rather than bugling, doing a lot of raking, getting in close to a bull with cows and raking, for me, I see that working way better than if you bugle at them. And I will say that, in my opinion, there's not enough people out there that are good enough buglers to consistently use the bugle. If you bugle like Steve Chappell, then yeah, you can probably use the bugle a lot more.
Corey, yeah.
Or Corey, if you don't sound like them,
Dirk, yeah.
Then you probably shouldn't. These are guys that are very, very good at the bugle. But what I'm saying is my ear hears a lot of other people that are not even in the same category, so they go out and expect. It would be like if I told you to go out and use a certain fly, and that's a method that I've done and it's very hard to do, and I tell you that's the way to fish and you'll catch every fish in the river. Well, if you don't mend, if you don't throw it the right way, it won't work at all. So yeah. I like coming in sweet more than coming in hot and trying to challenge an elk. But I will say, great point that someone said there is raking. In Arizona, on bulls that are 10, 11, 12 years old, cows that are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, raking is an unbelievable tool. And I've seen it work, and I use it a lot. I sneak in there. I don't make a single sound. I get 60, 70 yards, and I rake, and that bull will come right to me. A lot. So, finding one bull on many OTC hunts will run you ragged. Hunt 10, it says.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. I like the format. Someone else said, do the video, release the audio podcast later. Guys, don't worry about it. This will be released as audio on my podcast. I like the format of being able to have people have follow-ups. And I've thought of a call-in show as well where people could call in. And Chris and I have actually had a few people. We've kind of done a call-in type show. But love hearing all of your feedback. Guys, we're at the 2-hour point here. Chris, if you have any last question that you really want to answer, or if someone has something out there that's super pending, let's cover it, and then we'll have to just do this again.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got a couple here, but they're a little bit longer than what we probably can take. Okay, I tell you what, let's take this last question. And then the ones I have, I can do a little bit later, but I probably ought to get back to work.
Okay, sounds good. It says solo hunting. How do you manage to do both, rake and be ready to shoot? It helps a lot if you have someone with you. But what I would do is I would sneak in close. I would have your bow setting there, and I would go ahead and rake, see what kind of response. Go ahead and have your bow right there. And a lot of times they're going to come as soon as you hit the first tree and really start going, they're going to bugle. If you ignore them and don't bugle and go right back to the raking, that's what I do. they almost always on that second time when you hit that brush, they are coming, and they're coming right. They are coming straight at you.
Yeah, being close is key. Number one. Number two, yeah, I agree. Have an arrow. Have some. And this is the thing. I agree with Jay. This is where having multiple people there really helps, because a lot of times you can pick up a little skinny stick and rake like that, and that can work. But if you pick up something that's the size of the antlers of the animal that you're going, and just go. Sometimes that takes two hands. Okay, so you just got to play with it. Maybe have your bow sitting down on the ground next to you, but just be careful. You're snapping branches off, and a branch comes down and lands on your equipment. It could be tricky. So, but just rake, get yourself set, listen and evaluate what that bull does. And if he shows interest, but he's not moving yet, hit him again. Just hit him again, hit him again, hit him again. Play it off the bull and his interest in what he's doing.
And I've heard guys say, mix in a bugle, and I think that's fine. But what's worked for me, especially in Arizona, is you rake, they bugle, you ignore them. You rake
Correct.
Again, they bugle, you rake again.
Correct.
And they're like, what is that bull over there that won't bugle back at me? How dare him? And that's when they come to go, I want to know who this is in my territory that's raking next to my girls, and the nerve of them to do that. In my mind, when you talk about there is no such thing as a challenge bugle, when you rake and ignore that bull when he bugles at you, that's as close to a challenge as anything I know.
That's gonna be a different discussion. But I do like it. I have a different interpretation of the behavioral now. Oh, God damn! Sorry. All right. No, we're gonna have to. We'll save that discussion, because this is a good discussion. It's a good topic. But
we'll start with that one on the next one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, raking can be phenomenal, and in my opinion, I agree with you, Jay. No, do not bugle. If you cannot do, if it's just one of those things you just can't not do. You know what I mean? You're like
cow call.
Well, you could do that. But
then you're a bull with the cows over there, and that bull's going, now that bull has cows?
Or maybe one of my cows. Okay, now, if you have to bugle because I've been practicing my bugle, I gotta do something, then I would do what I talk about, what I kind of call like a check bugle, where you hear those bulls that they'll want to bugle, and then they think better of it. They're like, and just they want to bugle, but they're like, I might get my butt whooped. That, in my opinion, goes along with what the connotation of that raking is doing, because sometimes bulls will rake because they're frustrated and they're nervous and they're trying to make themselves out to be bigger than they are. And so that other bull hears that, and he's like, "Oh, dude, who that? No, get the freaking hell out of here." So I'm going to push you out now. So no, I agree with you, Jay. Just leave the bugle in your pack. And what to use to rake? A hard stick, like a log, or
about the size of a baseball bat.
Yep, but you want it hard, not some rotten thing that just falls apart. And quite honestly, there's some people, if you're walking around and you find a shed antler, like a brown shed, it doesn't matter, a shed antler, like a 4-point or 5-point shed antler, sometimes that's awesome to use. But, something about the big around as a baseball bat and really, really hard.
You bring up a point that we'll have to talk about another time, but a couple of small 5-point type antlers and clicking them together.
Oh, yeah, there's another one.
Sneaking in close to bull bedded with cows, and you start kind of clanking some antlers together and maybe rake just a little bit. Super deadly. Yeah. Chris, I want to thank you for your time. Rowhuntingresources.com. You can also check Chris out on Instagram as well. You guys know how to follow him. Talk about the elk module, how they need to sign up for the elk module.
Yeah, so it is, you just go to ROE-huntingresources.com. You're going to bring up the homepage, and you're going to see different stuff. You've got the educational material, you've got guided hunts, and then you've got the consulting stuff that I do. Just click on the education stuff, and then it'll bring up, I've got the elk module, deer, blah, blah, blah. And quite honestly, I've got 2 different subscription based. So it's all video based. There's over 50 hours of video on there now, heavy on the elk interaction, elk vocalization, actually seeing elk doing elky things. It's putting elk in front of you. The main point being is there are two different subscription options. There's one that's just for 3 months, which for you guys right now is a great option. Just you'll get August, September while you're hunting, and then you still have October to go back and an after action review what you saw in the field and what you did, and then you can go back and use it to kind of learn from there. Or you can do the annual one. The 3 month one is $25 and the annual one is $50. We've kept the prices the same, even though the more video we put on there, the more cost it is for us to host that on the interwebs. But we're going to keep the prices low now, just because we want, whether you're a high school kid, college student, anybody can afford it. Anybody can learn from it. So.
Well, I appreciate your time as always. And guys, I am going to turn this over and it's going to be on my podcast, so the audio portion.
Yeah.
You can also watch it on my Instagram. It will be a IGTV video. So this whole thing, you'll be able to rewatch it. And also I want to thank, obviously, Kuiu, Ultralight Hunting. Go to kuiu.com, go hunt, join the Insider, get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop card just for signing up. Use the J Scott promo code. Don't forget 10% on all the stuff at the gear shop. Tripods, optics, tents, whatever you want. And then phone scope, use the J Scott 21 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount. I know, Chris, I can say this for you. We appreciate all of you tuning in. Please send us your questions. We're going to do this again. And let us know what you need, and we're here to help. And I'm always learning. Chris doesn't have much to learn, but I know he learns a few things every now and then. But it's always great talking to you. I'm going to go walk Poppy, and
Cool.
It's raining outside, so it's another great day. And we're 30 days away here, roughly, from elk season.
Yeah.
So it's an awesome time to be alive.
All right, brother. Well, thanks for having me on here, and let's definitely do this again, and we'll powwow after, and I'll get this over on my side too, so that way everybody can have this into the future. So cool, man. Thanks for putting this together. It was fun.
Okay, buddy.
All right, bye.
God bless everybody. Bye.